The stars looked cold and empty from the bridge of the USS Horizon. Captain Jack stood near the main window and watched the darkness stretch out forever in every direction. There was nothing out here, no planets worth visiting, no stations, no other ships, just the endless black void of the outer rim where the Navy sent people it wanted to forget. 6 months ago, Jack had been a rising star in the fleet. He had commanded a battle cruiser and led missions that mattered. Then he made a choice that changed everything. A civilian transport ship was under attack by pirates, and command told him to hold position and wait for backup. The backup was 3 hours away. The civilians had minutes. Jack ignored his orders and saved 400 people that day. The Navy called it insubordination. They stripped him of his command and gave him the oldest ship still flying. They filled it with other people the Navy wanted to forget and sent them all to the edge of known space. The USS Horizon was 40 years old and held together by patches and prayers. Her engines groaned when she moved. Her sensors flickered at random moments. Her hull had been repaired so many times that the original metal was hard to find. She was a ship waiting to die, and the Navy had given her to Jack as a message. This is what happens to officers who think for themselves. But Jack was not alone in his exile. The Navy had gathered a crew of misfits and troublemakers, people who had committed the sin of being too honest or too brave or too unwilling to follow stupid orders. Lieutenant Amy was his second in command. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a temper that had gotten her into trouble more than once. She had punched a senior officer who ordered her team into a suicide mission. The officer lost 2 teeth. Amy lost her career. Chief Engineer Ben Carter kept the Horizon running through pure stubbornness. He was a large man with thick hands that could fix anything. The Navy hated him because he refused to follow their maintenance protocols. He said their protocols were written by people who had never touched a real engine. He was right, but being right did not matter to the brass. Dr. Lisa Grant ran the medical bay with quiet competence. She had been a rising star in fleet medical until she published a paper criticizing how the Navy treated wounded soldiers. The paper was accurate and well-researched. The Navy thanked her by sending her to the Horizon where she would never embarrass them again. Communications Officer Sam Torres was the youngest of the group. He had leaked classified documents that exposed corruption in the supply chain. Officers were stealing medicine meant for frontier colonies and selling it for profit. Sam thought people deserved to know. The Navy thought Sam deserved to disappear. These were the forgotten ones. The Navy gave them a simple mission: survey dead systems, file reports that no one would read, stay out of trouble for 3 years. If they did all that without causing problems, they might be allowed back into the real fleet. It was not a mission, it was a sentence. Jack accepted it because he had no choice. He gathered his crew of outcasts and told them the truth. They were not wanted, they were not valued, but they were still officers of the fleet, and they would do their jobs with pride. If the Navy wanted to forget them, fine. They would give the Navy nothing to complain about. The days passed slowly in the outer rim. They surveyed asteroid fields that held nothing of value. They mapped gas giants that no one would ever visit. They sent reports back to command and received nothing in return. The silence was complete. It was like they had stopped existing. On the 47th day of their mission, something changed. Sam was running a routine scan of a nearby moon when his instruments picked up something strange. He checked the readings 3 times before he believed them. Then he called the captain to the bridge. Jack arrived to find Sam staring at his screen with wide eyes. The young officer pointed at a pattern of signals coming from the frozen surface of an uncharted moon. The signals were structured. They repeated at regular intervals. They were not natural. Amy looked at the data and felt her heart beat faster. She had studied every known signal pattern in the fleet database. This matched nothing. It was not human. It was not from any species humanity had ever encountered. It was something new. Ben ran a diagnostic on the sensors to make sure they were not malfunctioning. The readings held steady. Whatever was sending that signal was real. Dr. Grant joined them on the bridge and watched as they analyzed the transmission. She was a scientist at heart, and she understood what this could mean. Humanity had been reaching into space for 200 years. They had found ruins and fossils and traces of ancient civilizations, but they had never found anyone alive. They had started to believe they were alone in the universe. This signal suggested otherwise. Jack stood in the center of his bridge and looked at the faces of his crew. These were the people the Navy had thrown away. These were the ones deemed not worthy of real missions. And now they were staring at what might be the most important discovery in human history. Protocol was clear. They should report the signal to command and wait for instructions. A proper contact team would be assembled. Experts would be consulted. The process would take months. By then, whatever was sending that signal might be gone or dead. Jack made a decision. He ordered Amy to plot a course for the moon. He told Ben to prepare the shuttle for landing. He asked Dr. Grant to ready her medical equipment just in case. He instructed Sam to keep monitoring the signal and try to learn anything he could about its source. His crew did not question him. They had all been punished for doing what they thought was right. They understood that sometimes the rules needed to bend. They followed their captain not because they had to, but because they trusted him. The USS Horizon changed course and headed toward the frozen moon. None of them knew what they would find there. None of them knew that this moment would change the course of human history. They only knew that something was calling to them from the darkness, and they were going to answer. The punishment mission had just become something else entirely. The shuttle descended through thin clouds of frozen gas toward the surface of the moon. Jack sat in the pilot's seat and watched the ground come closer. It was a world of ice and rock, colored in shades of gray and white. Nothing should have been alive down there. Nothing should have been sending signals. Yet something was. Amy sat beside him with a weapon on her hip. She did not expect trouble, but she always prepared for it. Ben was in the back checking his tools and equipment. Dr. Grant had her medical kit ready for whatever they might find. They had left Sam on the horizon to monitor communications and provide support from orbit. The signal grew stronger as they flew lower. Ben traced it to a valley between two massive ridges of ice. Jack brought the shuttle down slowly and landed on a flat stretch of frozen ground. Through the windows, they could see something that made them all go silent. A ship was lying in the valley. It had crashed hard and torn a long scar through the ice. The hull was dark and smooth, made of materials that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The shape was unlike any human design. It was longer and thinner, with curves that flowed like water frozen in motion. Parts of it were damaged and broken, but even in ruin it was beautiful. Jack opened the shuttle door and stepped onto the frozen surface. The cold hit him immediately, but his suit kept him warm. He walked toward the alien vessel with his crew following close behind. None of them spoke. There were no words for what they were feeling. The ship had an opening where part of the hull had torn away during the crash. Jack approached it carefully and shined his light inside. The interior was dark and filled with strange shapes. He could see control panels covered in symbols he did not recognize. He could see seats designed for bodies that were not human, and he could see movement. Something was alive in there. Jack climbed inside with Amy right behind him. Ben and Dr. Grant followed. They moved through the wreckage slowly, stepping over debris and broken equipment. The air inside was thin and cold. Emergency lights flickered weakly along the walls. The signal was coming from somewhere deeper in the ship. They found them in what looked like a medical bay. 3 beings lay on platforms that might have been beds. They were tall and thin, with limbs that seemed too long for their bodies. Their skin was like polished silver, smooth and reflective. Their eyes were large and dark, and in those eyes Jack could see the light of distant stars. 2 of them were unconscious. The third was awake and watching the humans with an expression that might have been fear or hope or something in between. It made a sound that was soft and musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. It was trying to speak. Dr. Grant moved forward immediately. She could see that these beings were injured. She did not know their biology. She did not know their medicine. But she was a doctor, and doctors help those in need. She knelt beside the closest alien and began to examine it with her instruments. Jack approached the conscious one slowly. He held up his empty hands to show he meant no harm. The alien watched him with those strange dark eyes. It made more sounds, and Jack wished desperately that he could understand. Amy found what looked like a communication device and brought it to Sam through their radio link. Sam began working on the translation immediately. He fed the alien sounds through every linguistic program he had. It would take time, but he was determined to crack it. Ben explored the rest of the ship. The damage was severe. The engines were destroyed. The hull had multiple breaches. Whatever had happened to this vessel, it had been violent. He found scorch marks that looked like weapon fire. Someone had attacked these beings. Dr. Grant worked through the night. She used her scanners to understand alien organs. She used human medicine to treat wounds that had never been touched by human hands. The aliens had different blood, different cells, different everything. But injury was injury. Pain was pain. She treated what she could and stabilized what she could not fix. By morning, all three aliens were alive and conscious. The eldest of them, a being with silver patterns on her skin that seemed to indicate age and rank, was strong enough to sit up. Sam had made progress on the translation. It was rough and incomplete, but communication was possible. The alien introduced herself through the broken translation as coordinator. She was a leader among her people, They were explorers and diplomats from a vast community of species that spanned the galaxy. They had been traveling through this sector when they were attacked. They crashed on this moon while trying to escape. Jack listened to her story with growing amazement. There was life throughout the galaxy, thousands of species, civilizations that had existed for millions of years. Humanity was not alone. They had never been alone. But told them something else, something that explained why humanity had never met anyone before. The galaxy knew about humans. They had been watching for a long time, and they had decided to stay away. Humans were considered too dangerous, too violent, too unpredictable. The galaxy had seen their wars and their weapons. They had watched humans fight each other with terrible fury. The decision had been made long ago to leave humanity alone until they either destroyed themselves or evolved into something safer. Jack did not know whether to laugh or cry. He looked at his crew of misfits and outcasts. He thought about the Navy that had thrown them away. He thought about all the flaws and failures of his species. Was not wrong. Humans could be terrible. But humans could also be kind. Humans could also be brave. Humans could also risk everything to save strangers they had never met. Dr. Grant had saved alien lives using nothing but human medicine and human determination. Jack and his crew had come to this moon not knowing what they would find, ready to help whatever needed helping. That had to count for something. Watched these humans with new eyes. She had expected primitives. She had expected violence. Instead, she found compassion. She did not know what to make of it. Before she could decide, her instruments detected something. Another ship was entering the system. The ones who had attacked her had followed. The hunters were coming. The warning came from Sam on the horizon. His voice crackled through the radio with an edge of fear. A ship had entered the system and was heading straight for the moon. It was large and heavily armed. It was not human. It was not. It was something else. Heard the report and her silver skin seemed to grow pale. She spoke quickly to the translation device and her words came through broken but clear. The hunters had found them. They had come. Jack asked her who they were, explained with growing urgency. They were predators. They did not build or create. They took. They harvested other species for biological materials. Their empire was built on the bodies of countless victims. The galactic community had been fighting them for centuries, but they were strong and ruthless. The ship had been carrying important information about movements. That was why they had been attacked. That was why they had been hunted across light years of space. They wanted to make sure that information never reached anyone who could use it. Amy listened to this and her hand moved to her weapon. She had spent her career fighting threats to innocent people. The enemy was different, but the situation was the same. There were predators coming for helpless victims. She knew what she wanted to do. Ben looked at the broken ship and then at the sky. His mind was already working on problems. The horizon was old and weak. The ship was a warship designed for combat. The math did not look good. Dr. Grant stood with her patients. The three were still recovering from their injuries. They could not run. They could not fight. If the humans left, they would die. Jack faced the hardest decision of his life. His orders were clear: avoid conflict, do not engage unknown forces, protect his crew and his ship above all else. The smart thing to do was pack up the shuttle, fly back to the horizon and run. No one would blame him. No one would even know what happened here. But Jack had not orders to save that civilian transport because it was smart. He had done it because he could not live with himself if he did nothing while innocent people died. He looked at her wounded crew. They were not human, but they were still people. They were still alive. They still deserved a chance. He made his decision. He told Amy to prepare defensive positions around the crashed ship. He told Ben to get back to the horizon and make her ready for combat. He told Dr. Grant to stay with the wounded and keep them alive no matter what happened. He told Sam to send a message to the incoming ship. Sam asked what message. Jack thought for a moment. Then he said to tell them that the beings on this moon were under human protection. Tell them that any attack on them would be considered an attack on humanity. Tell them to leave or face the consequences. Sam sent the message. For a few minutes there was silence. Then the response came. The commander spoke through the translation system. His voice was harsh and grinding, like metal scraping against stone. He laughed at the human threat. He said his people had conquered 100 worlds. He said they had broken species that were ancient when humanity was still living in caves. He said one tiny ship of primitives was not even worth the ammunition it would take to destroy them. He gave them one chance to leave. If they were gone in 10 minutes, he would let them live. If they stayed, they would die with them. Jack did not respond. He was already moving, already working on the plan that was forming in his mind. He told Amy to hold the ground. He told Ben to give him everything the horizon had. He told Sam to be ready with more tricks. Then he ran for the shuttle and flew back to his ship. The commander waited 10 minutes. When the human ship did not leave, he smiled. Or at least he made the expression that passed for a smile among his people. He ordered his troops to prepare for landing. The primitives would learn their place. Amy watched the drop pods fall from the sky like burning stars. She had positioned her small team around the crashed ship. There were only 4 of them on the ground, but she had been fighting outnumbered her whole career. She knew how to make every shot count. Ben had left behind supplies from the shuttle before returning to the horizon: mining charges, spare parts, tools that could become weapons. Amy had used them to turn the valley into a killing field. The ice was rigged with explosives. The approaches were covered with sensors. Every path to the ship was a trap waiting to spring. The first troops hit the ground and moved toward their target. They were large and armored, built for combat in a way humans were not. They carried weapons that could cut through steel. They expected no resistance from primitive mammals who had barely discovered faster than light travel. They did not expect the ground to explode beneath their feet. The first wave died in seconds. The second wave learned caution. They moved slower, looking for traps. Amy used that against them. She fired from one position, then moved to another before they could react. She was everywhere and nowhere. She made 4 people seem like 40. In orbit, Jack began his own impossible fight. The horizon was tiny compared to the warship. Her weapons were meant for pirates and asteroids, not military vessels. But Jack had spent his whole career learning how to fight with what he had instead of what he wanted. He used the debris field around the moon as cover. He darted between rocks and chunks of ice, forcing them to track him through a maze. He fired missiles from angles that should have been impossible. Sam broadcast false signals that made the horizon appear in multiple places at once. The commander grew angry. This was not how primitives were supposed to fight. This was not how anyone was supposed to fight. The battle for the frozen moon had begun. They had never faced anything like this. They were used to hunting weak prey. They were used to victories that came easy and quick. The humans were supposed to die fast and simple. Instead, the humans were fighting back with a fury that seemed impossible for such a small force. On the surface of the moon, Amy had turned the frozen valley into a nightmare for the attackers. Every step forward cost the lives. She had learned long ago that wars were not won by strength alone. They were won by will, and humans had will in abundance. She moved through the ice like a ghost. She fired and disappeared. She led enemies into traps and watched them fall. The other 3 crew members on the ground followed her lead. They were not soldiers. They were a doctor, an engineer, and a communications officer. But they fought like they had been born for this. Dr. Grant protected her patients with a ferocity that surprised even herself. When a warrior broke through the perimeter and reached the crashed ship, she met him with nothing but a medical laser and pure determination. The tool was not designed as a weapon, but Lisa made it work. The warrior fell, and she went back to tending the wounded without missing a beat. Ben had returned to the surface after preparing the horizon for automatic combat maneuvers. He used his engineering skills to improvise weapons from wreckage. He turned damaged technology into explosive devices. He rigged power cells to overload when touched. Every piece of broken equipment became a danger to the enemy. The commander watched his troops die and felt something he had not experienced in a long time: doubt. These humans were not fighting like primitives. They were fighting like something much more dangerous. They were fighting like survivors. In orbit, Jack was playing the most dangerous game of his life. The horizon shook with every hit she took. Her old hull groaned under the strain. Warning lights flashed across every console, but she kept flying. She kept fighting. Jack had studied the ship during the early exchanges. He noticed that their weapons had a slight delay between shots. He noticed that their shields were stronger in front than behind. He noticed that their sensors had trouble tracking small, fast targets through dense debris fields. He used every weakness he could find. Sam fed him constant updates. The young officer had hacked into the communication frequencies and was listening to their commands. He told Jack where the enemy ship was turning before it finished turning. He told him where the weapons were aiming before they fired. It was not much of an advantage, but Jack made it count. The horizon darted through the debris like a fish through water. She took hits that should have destroyed her, but Ben had reinforced the hull in ways the original designers never intended. She fired back with everything she had, wearing down the enemy shields shot by shot. The battle lasted for hours. On the surface, Amy ran out of explosives and started using rocks. Dr. Grant ran out of medical supplies and started making bandages from torn clothing. Ben ran out of tricks and started fighting hand to hand. They were exhausted and outnumbered and running out of everything. But they did not stop. They did not surrender. They did not even consider it. Watched from inside the crashed ship, she had seen many battles in her long life. She had seen species rise and fall. She had never seen anything like this. These humans were fighting for strangers they had met only hours ago. They were risking their lives for beings who were not even the same species. It made no sense to her. It was illogical and irrational and beautiful. The turning point came when Sam found something in the communications. The enemy ship was having engine problems. The constant maneuvering through the debris field had strained their systems. They were trying to hide it, but Sam could hear the worry in their voices. Jack made his move. He pushed the horizon harder than she had ever been pushed. He flew straight at the warship, drawing all their fire. At the last moment, he dove beneath them and came up behind where their shields were weakest. He fired everything he had left into their engines. The ship shuddered and went dark. Power failed across their systems. Weapons went offline. Shields collapsed. They were crippled and helpless. On the surface, the warriors saw their ship lose power. They heard the silence from their commanders. For the first time, they felt fear. They stopped advancing and began to retreat toward their drop pods. Amy let them go. She was too tired to chase them. She was too relieved to care about finishing the fight. The victory was enough. Jack looked at the disabled enemy ship and faced another choice. He could destroy them. His weapons were still working. They could not defend themselves. After everything they had done, after all the lives they had taken across the galaxy, no one would blame him for ending them. But Jack thought about why he had been sent to this dead corner of space. He had been punished for saving lives when he was supposed to let them die. He had been exiled for being too merciful in a navy that valued obedience over compassion. If he destroyed the helpless now, he would become something he had never wanted to be. He opened a channel to the crippled ship. He told the commander that the battle was over. He offered them a chance to leave. He would not fire on a helpless enemy. He would not become a killer of the defenseless. The commander did not understand. Mercy was not something his people knew. He waited for the killing shot that never came. When he finally realized that the humans were letting him live, he felt something that might have been shame, or perhaps it was the first spark of respect. The ship limped away on emergency power. As it left the system, it carried a message back to the galaxy. Humanity was small and young and fragile, but they were not to be underestimated. They were not to be hunted. They were something new under the stars. Jack looked at his battered ship and his exhausted crew. They had won. Against all odds, against all logic, they had won. The silence after battle was strange and heavy. Jack sat in his captain's chair and looked at the damage reports scrolling across his screen. The horizon had taken a beating that should have killed her. Half her systems were offline. Her hull had holes in places that would take months to repair. But she was still flying. She was still alive. On the surface of the moon, Amy gathered her team and walked back to the crashed ship. They were bruised and bleeding and more tired than they had ever been. But they were also smiling. They had done something impossible. They had faced a superior enemy and won. Dr. Grant went immediately back to her patients. The three had survived the battle unharmed. She checked their wounds and adjusted their treatments. Watched her work with those dark eyes that held the light of stars. The human doctor had saved her life twice now, first with medicine, then with courage. Ben started repairs on the shuttle. They would need it to ferry people back to the horizon. His hands were shaking from exhaustion, but he kept working. He had always found peace in fixing things. After all the destruction, it felt good to build something again. Sam ran communications from the horizon, coordinating between the ground team and the ship. He had not slept in over 30 hours. His voice was hoarse from talking, but he had never felt more alive. He had helped make first contact with alien life. He had helped win an impossible battle. His career might be ruined, but his life had meaning. Asked to speak with Jack. She used the translation device that Sam had improved during the battle. Her words came through clearer now, though still imperfect. She had something important to say. Jack came down to the surface and sat with the coordinator in the wreckage of her ship. Outside, the frozen moon looked peaceful. It was hard to believe that violence had touched this place just hours ago. Told Jack that she had lived for many of his centuries. She had seen species rise and fall. She had witnessed wars that burned across star systems. She had met beings of great power and beings of great cruelty, but she had never met anyone quite like humans. She asked him a question that had been forming in her mind since she first woke to find these strange, soft beings trying to save her life. Why had he risked everything for strangers? His ship was damaged. His crew was in danger. He could have run and no one would have blamed him. Why did he stay? Jack thought about the question for a long time. He thought about the civilian transport he had saved and the career it had cost him. He thought about his crew of misfits who had followed him into an impossible fight without hesitation. He thought about what it meant to be human. He told that humans were not perfect. They were violent and selfish and made terrible mistakes. They had wars that killed millions. They had cruelty that understanding. The galaxy was right to be cautious of them. But humans also had something else. They had the ability to choose to be better than their worst instincts. He told her that every human carried both darkness and light inside them. The darkness was real. The capacity for destruction was real. But so was the capacity for compassion. So was the choice to help a stranger even when it cost you everything. He said that his crew had been thrown away by their own people. They had been punished for doing the right thing. They had been sent to this empty corner of space to be forgotten. But when the moment came, when innocent lives hung in the balance, they chose compassion over safety. They chose courage over caution. They chose to be the best version of themselves. That was what humanity could be, not perfect, not safe, but capable of greatness when greatness was needed. Listened to his words and felt something shift inside her. She had spent her life believing that humans were too dangerous to contact. She had accepted the wisdom of keeping them isolated until they grew beyond their violent nature. Now she wondered if that wisdom had been wrong. Humans were dangerous, but they were also extraordinary. Their chaos was not just destruction, it was also creativity. Their unpredictability was not just violence, it was also courage. Their passion was not just rage, it was also love. She made a decision. She would return to the galactic community and tell them what she had witnessed. She would tell them about the human crew that risked everything to save strangers. She would tell them about the captain who offered mercy to enemies who deserved none. She would tell them that humanity was ready to join the stars. It would not be easy. Many species would resist. Many would still fear what humans might become, but had influence, and she had witnessed something that could not be ignored. Humanity had proven itself in the only way that mattered, through action, through sacrifice, through choice. Jack thanked her, but he said the thanks should go to his crew. Amy had held the line when anyone else would have broken. Ben had kept them flying when the ship should have fallen apart. Dr. Grant had saved lives that were supposed to be beyond saving. Sam had turned their disadvantages into advantages through pure cleverness. These were the people the Navy had thrown away. These were the ones deemed not worthy of real missions, and they had just changed the course of human history. In the weeks that followed, rescue ships arrived. They were recovered and returned to their people. The story spread through the galactic community like fire. Humans had faced thee and won. Humans had shown mercy to defeated enemies. Humans were not what everyone had assumed. The crew of the USS Horizon became famous in ways they had never imagined. They had been sent on a punishment mission, exiled to a dead corner of space where nothing ever happened. Instead, they had made first contact with alien life. They had fought impossible odds and won. They had proven that humanity deserved a place among the stars. Jack stood on the bridge of his battered ship and watched the stars stretch out before him. Somewhere out there, civilizations were learning about what had happened on a frozen moon at the edge of known space. Somewhere out there, decisions were being made about humanity's future. He looked at his crew. Amy stood at her station with pride she had not shown in years. Ben was down in engineering, humming as he worked on repairs. Dr. Grant was reviewing medical data from her alien patients, already thinking about how to help other species. Sam was monitoring communications from across the galaxy, listening to the universe talk about them. They had been the forgotten ones. They had been the ones nobody wanted. Now they were the first humans to ever meet another intelligent species. They were the ones who had proven that humanity was worth knowing. The punishment mission had become something else entirely. The stars waited, full of wonders and dangers beyond imagination, and humanity was finally ready to meet them. This was not an ending, this was a beginning.